So this is wildly ambitious. It's going to go way too fast. Hopefully it'll go too fast to be completely understood. You'll see why I say that in a minute. I certainly hope it goes too fast for any kind of meaningful critique to emerge. But posterity will judge. Really what we're going to need to do is a little bit of a bunny hop this morning. As I understand it, this is what Felix Baumgartner did to avoid the flat spin that made the blood come through your eyeballs as you're coming down from 128,000 feet on a 40-acre, very, very paper wafer-thin helium balloon that would lift you into the stratosphere. I'm certainly starting the launch from the stratosphere, or at least my version of the stratosphere. And I don't want to end up in a flat spin. I don't want to see blood come from your eyeballs. I certainly don't want to have it come from mine. So I'd ask you all to do what I'm told is a cure for the flat spin, which is a bunny hop. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that is, but let's say that we know. Let's enact our own bunny hops in our own individual, glorious, diverse, wonderful, magical ways, and then we'll avoid the blood and eyeballs thing. Let's start here. Academia is to knowledge what prostitution is to love. Close enough on the surface, but to the non-sucker, not exactly the same thing. This is Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Some of you will know this from his book of aphorisms called The Bed of Procrustes. The bed of Procrustes, of course, is the bed that we all make and lie in daily if the learner is not to the dimensions of the learning environment. We either stretch or begin to chop, and suddenly everything fits. I think this is part of what Taleb is complaining about. It's certainly part of what this community has sought to militate against ever since I've been aware of it, and certainly since its very inception. This is not what we meant at all. Or this statement from a colleague, which I heard at Virginia Tech in the presence of other people, shortly after I got there. In fact, this person who said these words seemed to think that this was drawing a bright line that would lead to the betterment of humankind. It was said in response to my own particular bunny hop that day, having to do with the glories of participatory on the internet. And I went on and I went on and I produced this example and that example. It was multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. It was glorious. It was the World Wide Web. You may have heard of it. It's catching on. And this is what my colleagues said. It may be learning, but it's not academics. Yeah, that's the face of the enemy. Not that he's the enemy, but the thing that not only made this occur to him to say, but made him think this was a glorious thing to say. This is part of what, as I understand it, we want to militate against in the kindest, friendliest, most bunny hoppish way. Nevertheless, really, it may be learning, but it's not academics. That may have something to do with the bag of gold myopia that I discussed 3 years ago. So here's a lovely cinematic illustration of what I'm trying to say. Here is our glorious struggle, oh comrades, in its fullest, deepest, and most engaging sense. If we could have audio,
please. Tell you the little story of right hand, left hand? The story of good and evil? H-A-T-E. It was with this left hand that old Brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low. L-O-V-E. You see these fingers, dear hearts, these fingers has veins that run straight to the soul of man. The right hand, friends, the hand of love. Now watch and I'll show you the story of life. These fingers, dear hearts, is always a warring and a tugging, one against the other. Now watch 'em. Old brother left hand hates a fighting. And it looks like love's a goner. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hot dog loves a winning. Yes, sirree. It's love that won. And old left-hand hate is down for the count.
I never heard it better told.
We did it. Thank you. I mean, there it is. Open education. In fact, you can take the world's best courses online for free. At the time of this screenshot, 401,240 Courserians, all of whom have OPEN, winning. We did it. The caliber of Coursera's partners, Princeton, Stanford, and the University of Pennsylvania, were among the original partners, has given it credibility and cachet in higher education circles, so much so that some university presidents have begun to fret that it will reflect badly on them if they fail to sign on. You're known by your partners, and this is the College of Cardinals, said E. Gordon Gee, the president of Ohio State, one of the new partners. It's some of the best universities in the country. There's only one country. It's the country. This is the United States of America, of course. But I understand that our neighbors to the north have now become involved in the College of Cardinals as well. And soon we can pray that we will see white smoke emerging from Coursera. We will find out who is, in fact, the Pope of Learning. We can kiss her ring. We can seek a blessing. And yet, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. But then there's Udacity, of course, which has gotten lots of stories, press, and interest. There is Udemy, there is P2PU, there is Google online courses, power searching with Google Hangout on air, number one. There they are. It was an interesting session. I was there. In fact, Google, recursively, is now doing a course builder kit. So you can download an open source course builder kit. You can roll your own LMS at last, be in charge of the management of learning worldwide by simply enrolling in the course about the course builder kit, which is part of Google's online courses. And that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. Or, of course, there's the showdown, the wars that are erupting, that tug of war. Even though we've won, it still goes on. I don't know. What is it about peace? We don't like it very much. For example, at conference, leaders of traditional online learning meet upstart free providers. It's great. It's the return of the Jedi Empire. I've lost track of the episodes. A long-time online learning pioneer sounded a note of frustration at a national cyber learning conference here last week. The complaint was over the perception that MOOCs, or massive open online courses run by highly selective universities, are the biggest drivers of innovation in online learning. The hyper-prestigious universities are not driving the change, said Jack M. Wilson, President Emeritus of the University of Massachusetts, who founded UMass Online some 10 years ago. And he went on to say, if we had 10% completion rates at UMass Online, I'd be in the Massachusetts jail instead of the Massachusetts University. Joked. He praised the new entrants for bringing attention to the value of online education. Massive, open online education. But said that is not who has led online learning or who is going to lead online learning. And poor Sebastian Thrun, who was there in the audience and had to respond, stressed that he and others at Udacity were working to quickly improve their platform and teaching methods as they learned from their mistakes. And I'm not cynical about this. I think they are. I've been a teacher all my life at Carnegie Mellon and Stanford, and I've never been taught how to teach, he said, noting that even in his in-person classes, he's always tried out different approaches. Now, he has a chance to experiment with hundreds of thousands of students. I mean, this is amazing. Leading professors at leading research universities now tell us that they never learned how to teach. Who knew? And yet, during his talk, Mr. Thrun noted some new directions to come for the company. He said Udacity would soon announce a new way to make money by getting companies to finance the development of classes they care about. And he estimated that the cost of running free courses was about $1 per student per course. So for next to nothing, you can take a course that a company cares about you taking. That is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. And I have to stress that I'm fighting this right now. I'm fighting this own open, closed, love, hate, Robert Mitchum versus Icy Spoons thing in my own heart, because I don't think Sebastian Thrun is cynical. I don't think Daphne Kohler or Andrew Ng are cynical. I think people are really trying to figure this out. The point is that in the middle of the figuring it out, what did we mean? What was it? What was this openness? What was it we meant? Certainly it has to do with inspiration. So for some inspiration, enough of this bunny hopping. Don't pay any attention to me. Let's listen to MIT.
So something so novel, so new, so different is for many faculty and students at MIT very exciting, at the same time very scary. This is something new, it's different, it's potentially disruptive.
Harvard and MIT recognize the incredible effect that technology is having on education today.
It's opening new vistas in education for the world, for our campuses.
Online education for students around the world will be the next big thing in education. This is the single biggest change in education since the printing press.
We plan to make available courses and educational materials to anyone who has an internet connection.
Technology can strengthen education, both for our on-campus students as well as for those around the world.
Our goal is to educate 1 billion people around the world.
1 billion people there, 1 billion people here. Pretty soon you're talking about real people. University of Texas got the message. Yesterday, they announced they're investing $5 million in the effort to educate 1 billion people on a planetary scale. They've bought into edX, so it's MIT, it's Harvard, it's UCal, Berkeley. It's now the University of Texas system over here, and the world's finest universities that are not those universities over here, and they're locked in a struggle. Is it going to be Coursera? Is it going to be edX? Or will it be Udacity? Because when the corporate funds start flowing in, well, who knows? And we have a system in place to make sure this works. The system's Institute for Transformational Learning will direct the approval of courses and work with edX to train faculty members to teach them. Higher education is at a crossroads, said Steve Mintz, the Institute's executive director. We can provide education that will be active, visual, virtual, and above all, stress interaction. That is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. You follow where I'm going with this? What we're seeing are developments in the higher education landscape that appear to meet every single one of the criteria we have set forth for open education. Increased access, decreased cost, things that will allow more people than ever on a planetary scale, 1 billion individual learners at a time, customize their education, fit it into their busy lives, earn a paycheck, find a path towards a glorious vocational future. Isn't that what we meant? What about this? Which becomes this. Which becomes this. Which becomes this. Take the EduPunk quiz and know in your heart that even this is sustainable because it's sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. Now there's a slide with a lot of text. Can you see it in the back? One of the key aspects of your work this semester, this is from an actual syllabus, adopting blogging, an activity that many of us have found to be transformational in ways that were never stipulated or largely even acknowledged by anyone in higher education. And this particular assignment goes on this way. One of the key aspects of your work this semester is our course blog, in which you'll write frequently, using your posts to respond to our course readings, to draw your classmates' attention to articles and artifacts you found, and so forth. You are required to post at least one entry each week, which should directly engage with the week's readings before the start of class on Monday. This entry should be as formal as a printed reading response would be, paying attention to the quotation, citation, and explication, practices involved in close reading. Other entries are greatly desired. These can be as informal as you like. You can explore issues that have been raised in previous class discussion, but you must significantly expand on that discussion and not simply rehash what's already been said. You can skip 2 of these reading response posts with impunity. You are also required to read your classmates' posts and leave at least 2 comments each week before the start of class on Wednesday. Note that you don't have to, are you following? Note that you don't have to post the 2 comments at the same time. Just make sure that week to week you get those entries and comments in. This weekly requirement is met as a minimum acceptable level of participation. I hope that you'll all contribute more, creating an ongoing, engaging dialogue. This is an honest effort to embrace an open educational practice. But there is some framing, some pressure, some kind of unspoken set of criteria that we are all, we, including myself, laboring under in the way we've thought about learning itself that keeps pushing things back in this other direction. The media blog grading rubric. A very detailed, fine-grained, thoughtful, laborious attempt to tell the student what this stuff counts for, how to do the assignment. It's guidance in an online open learning platform. And it goes on, and it goes on, and it says, be creative and explore something new. Good luck. Now, that's scary. I don't know that we escape that in our discourse either. What is it that has taken all of the openness, all of the goodness, the richness, the titanic struggles, the many disruptions of what we know as academia, and has kept producing this? It's entirely possible that the instructor put this together because the students demanded it. This is a system we're talking about. This is why the heroes and villains thing, though there is villainy afoot, and a few heroes I've met as well, isn't going to get us there. And that's a hard one. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. That's on that rubric too. As if somehow inside of what is really a horrific kind of granulation of this openness, there is also within the instructor this desire, this knowledge. This is not what this instructor meant. This is not what this instructor meant at all. So lately I've been thinking about double binds. And one of the theorists of the double binds, a fellow named Gregory Bateson. This is what he writes. The essence of a double bind is 2 conflicting demands, each on a different logical level, neither of which can be ignored or escaped. This leaves the victim torn both ways, so that whichever demand they try to meet, the other demand cannot be met. I must do it, but I can't do it, is a typical description of the double bind experience. Victims may express feelings of extreme anxiety in such a situation, as they attempt to fulfill the demands of the primary injunction, albeit with obvious contradictions in their actions. What we're seeing is a double bind. What we're seeing is a double bind our students are in. It's a double bind we are in as well. We have put ourselves there. Double binds are often used as a form of control without open coercion. The use of confusion makes them difficult to respond to or resist. Further complications arise when frequent double binds are part of an ongoing relationship to which the person or group is committed, an ongoing relationship like education. Gregory Bateson writes even more haunting words about these double binds. When he thinks about the treatment of mentally ill patients inside hospitals, he writes, since hospitals exist for the benefit of personnel as well as much as more than for the patient's benefit, there will be contradictions at times and sequences where actions are taken benevolently for the patient when actually they are intended to keep the staff more comfortable. We would assume that whenever the system is organized for hospital purposes and it is announced to the patient that the actions are for his benefit, then the schizophrenogenic situation is being perpetuated. This kind of deception will provoke the patient to respond to it as a double bind situation, and his response will be schizophrenic in the sense that it will be indirect and the patient will be unable to comment on the fact that he feels he is being deceived. Our best students are the ones most fully prey to this situation. Perhaps our best instructors are as well. How do you respond to a double bind? How do you get yourself out of a situation in which you have one communication, another communication, those two things are in complete conflict, you're committed to the relationship, and nobody's allowing you to talk about what you're experiencing? Well, Bateson, in Toward a Theory of Schizophrenia, outlines three possible responses. One is to be paranoid. All meta-messages signal sinister intent. The patient is suspicious and defiant. I've known students like that who go through school saying, you know what? They're all out to get me. They're all the man, occasionally the woman. This is not at all what it seems to be. I'll play their game, but I don't have to go along with it. Or hebephrenic, in which levels of message, context, and metacontext cannot be reliably known, so all messages are treated as trivial or ridiculous. Who cares? Get drunk. Get drunk again. Get drunk one more time. Get drunk at the end of a long funnel in which everyone else is getting drunk. What difference does it make? I say this as a graduate of the home of the gentleman's sea, typically lying down. And that would be the University of Virginia. I didn't say that. Or you can become catatonic, in which metacommunicative messages are simply ignored. The patient is withdrawn, perhaps mute. When I read this, I was struck and deeply moved to think that I have listened to students and colleagues who describe their own relationship toward the institution we call higher education as one determined primarily by paranoia, hebephrenia, or catatonia. Relief is at hand at WeTakeYourClass.com, in which online courses can be taken by people who are paid to take your online courses. Life is too short to spend on classes you have no interest in, which is actually true. We take your online college classes for you and get an A. But there it is. There's the paranoia, there's the hebephrenia, there's the catatonia. What difference would it make unless you cared about the A, but you know the A is meaningless, which is why you pay somebody to get it for you, yet you want the A because you know it is meaningful, because people want you to get an A for things that you don't even know whether you want or not. Nevertheless, you feel committed to this thing. This thing we call life in the 21st century. That is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. So if you're looking for an answer this morning, I would be the last one to give it to you. Under the strict criteria I have proposed, if I gave you an answer, then you should react with paranoia, hebephrenia, or catatonia. Some of you may be slipping into these states even as I speak. You shouldn't believe me. The whole idea is not simply to take any of this as given or gospel. Not simply to look for the tattoos on the knuckles or the billion people in a learning environment or any of those things. But to think differently in ways that I obviously cannot specify, because then they're not different anymore. Yet there may be a bunny hop or two that we can take together along the way. This book has been very important for me. Rethinking School in the Age of the Computer. The Age of the Computer refers to 1993 in this book. And Seymour Papert in The Children's Machine distinguishes two kinds of prevailing attitudes towards school. There are the schoolers who believe that we can just tweak this. We can do what we do now at greater scale. We can do what we do now for free. We can continue to do this. In other words, we can have blogging that looks like term papers. We can have online discussion forums in which the teacher prompts everything. We can have open access education to the absolute most wearying models of computer-aided instruction imaginable, chunked with multiple choice tests. Papert contrasts with the schoolers, the yearners, who have a deep intuition that mega change is necessary and a deep conviction that mega change is possible. And as I think about this, of course I recognize that I'm a yearner, and one of the things that so draws me to this community is the quality of yearning, and I begin to think, so what is the mega change that our yearning could lead to? And I wonder if education based on yearning might be one way to think about it. Yearning is a very interesting word. It's a very old word. The earliest definition in the Oxford English Dictionary comes from 888. Just as the English language was getting started, there was the need for this word to desire earnestly, to experience a strong desire or longing for. And of course, what's ironic in that clip from The Night of the Hunter is that the people who desire, who have a strong yearning, are all going in opposite vectors. They're all going either towards the pathogenic or towards a journey down the river in which benign or malign animals will watch over them or perhaps prey upon them as they make their journey, in which a little doll is stuffed with money. A parent has died. A preacher is after them. And soon that preacher will sing a duet with the guardian angel who appears. What's that about? What kind of yearning is that? Perhaps it's an ecology of yearning. This is the Bateson book that I've been referring to, Steps to an Ecology of Mind. You should drop everything. You should leave now. Go read the book. It's an extraordinary book by a cultural anthropologist. You thought I was kidding. Bateson talks about this, that there are ways in which meta-messages can signal the relationship among ideas that we seek people to at least entertain, if not to adopt. And in Steps to an Ecology of Mind, Bateson over and over and over, whether it's about learning or schizophrenia or ecology or evolution, communication, cybernetics, keeps coming back to these ideas of ecologies, of thinking at a systems level, thinking that, for example, open is not simply a quality to adopt or a direction to pursue. Open is a certain attitude towards systems and the desires those systems empower and focus. You get to strange places in ecologies of ideas. I love it when suddenly the universe thrusts upon me an ecology of ideas. Both of these were in my mailbox last week. The one on the left is a book of essays on John Milton, written on pieces of dead paper. We're beyond all of that. It's not free. You have to pay for the book. I don't get paid for it. Somebody does. I have an essay in there on Milton. I keep doing that. It's meaningful, despite largely a higher education, peer-reviewed professional publishing model that suppresses the kind of ecology I'm describing. But I'm in there. And I'm in Pete's book, too. He doesn't name-check me, doggone it. But I'm in there because there are aspects of his story that are mine as well. And in both of these books, there are massive, massive ecologies of yearning. To repair the ruins, smash your guitar. Or as one person pointed out very astutely about the No Digital Facelifts talk I did back in 2009, the bags of gold thing became a riff, and I'm really glad it did. I love riffs, right? That's why I like Walk This Way. It's why I like Sweet Emotion. It's why I like Pinball Wizard. I'll stop now. It's all dad rock. But the real heart of the matter is this idea of the music of the spheres that leads to strange correspondences and grand harmonies, something to yearn for. How will we ever have time for that? We have so much to cover. There will be a quiz. There are standards of learning. There are textbooks. And yet, what a thing to desire. Earnestly, what a thing to long for. Strange correspondences, grand harmonies. They're just mad at me because I'm a mystical truth teller. This is Wayne Whitehart, who picks up junk at these roadside art stands and does what he calls word paintings on them. I recommend them to you. I found out about them because Somebody gave me a link that led to a link that led to a link, and the next thing I knew, it was strange correspondence and grand harmony time. And I looked at this thing, and I did not slip into paranoia, hebephrenia, or catatonia. I got excited. So what will all of this add up to? What could he possibly mean after all? Never mind what you may mean after all. I want to think about that now. Now that we're a little closer to the Earth, I'd like to maybe at least let the drogue chute go, see what the view looks like from a mile up. I don't see any blood coming from any eyeballs, and I think I'm okay, so let's move. Bateson actually discusses what he calls a hierarchy of learning. This resonated with me very, very powerfully because I keep finding, as the Prufrock quotation indicates, it's very, very difficult to figure out what it is we mean or what it is we want to communicate when we talk about open education. Bateson says there's such a thing as zero learning, the receipt of signal. No error is possible. Or as my high school band director once told me when I was in a particularly bad place, he said, "Gardner, ask your dog how he's doing. He'll give you the right answer." Right? There is something about the condition of zero learning where you simply respond to the stimulus in the moment. Now, that's great except for the problem that there's no culture or civilization possible under these circumstances. So we have to move beyond that. And what we've done is invent a technology called education to take us from zero learning through this hierarchy. The next step is learning one, a change in the specificity of response by correction of errors of choice within a set of alternatives. Pavlovian learning is like this. Habituation is like this. Multiple choice tests are like this. The kind of administered intellectuality that says make sure your blog post looks like this is like this. There is a stimulus and there is a response. That's not nothing. That's a start. But it's not where we need to end up. And too much of what we discuss when we discuss learning does seem to me to stall at this level. But then there's learning two. Learning to learn, context recognition, corrective change in the set of alternatives for which choice is made, or in how the sequence of experience is punctuated. Here the premises are self-validating. This is really tricky. Bateson stresses that the set of strategies you learn in learning to learn have a great liberating effect in that you begin to understand it's not just about a bell and salivation. I'm actually in a context, and that context helps me understand what it is I ought to do. So when the guy in the lab comes with the harness, I smell the harness, I know there's going to be a buzzer and maybe some food in my future. This is all kind of good. When I go to the web page, I register for my classes. I know there will be education. It will amount to credit hours. I will get an education. This is good. And yet he also points out that when you're at this level, there's also a trap. There's also that Prufrockian moment because the context you become aware of is within a context that lets you become aware of that context. And everything you see conforms to that meta-context. So the thing you've learned to do specifies all the other things you will learn to do, and it will make sense. That's the tragedy of it all. There's no opportunity within this level to say, wait, what is a credit hour? Why are you doing this to me? Why a textbook? Could we have a free something else? Something better than a textbook? What Alan Kay described as a book that suggests to you a way to construct a model for yourself of the knowledge you are gaining. Now that would be interesting. Maybe you'd get some money for that at the used bookstore. They don't take textbooks. There's a reason for that. Learning 2 is an advance on learning 1. It is not the whole story. There is learning 3. Meta-contextual perspective, imagining and shifting contexts of understanding, a corrective change in the system of sets of alternatives from which choice is made. Put self at risk. Questions become explosive. And this is serious business. These are the kinds of risks that learners at their best are going to be able, within a certain meta-context, to entertain. But in this level, the bets are off. Even the bets about the bets being off are off. Can you hear where this is going? When Bateson describes this particular level of learning, which we say is what we want. If you look at 15 university mission statements, probably something like critical thinking will be mentioned, or lifelong learning, or the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. But Bateson is really not kidding about this. He says it's not just adaptation or habituation. It's the ability to think about strategies and contexts from which one could choose to adapt or not, depending on any number of things in this ecology of ideas. It makes my head hurt to think about this. You can't just think about the experimental learning situation. You have to think about the experimenter in the experimental learning situation and the complete ecosystem of research dollars funding the experimenter who's running experiments in the learning situation. There's no necessary end to this. And yet, this is where we become most human, Bateson says, and where we can exercise agency within an ecology of ideas most effectively. Then there's learning 4, which is meta to learning 3, which probably does not occur in any adult living organisms on this earth. Although Bateson is very sneaky, and he says, on the other hand, it may be that the evolution of the species represents the emergence of the possibility of level 4 as we think together. The hierarchy is discontinuous. The thing that gets you from 0 to 1 is not the same thing that gets you from 1 to 2, is not the same thing that gets you from 2 to 3. So it doesn't matter whether you have 10 textbooks or 1 billion textbooks. That's not going to get you to the next level. It may be important. It may be a necessary starting place. But you can't just keep piling on more of the same. Just as a longer B paper does not become an A paper. It just won't work. And discouragingly, just when you thought a standing was in sight, there are similar hierarchies of meta messages about meta contexts. There is no necessary end to this process that he's describing, and that's terrifying and wonderful. It means that there's no place we can stop, and there's no place we have to stop. And that's one of the central curiosities of what it means to have cognition. Bateson says, all communication has this characteristic. It can be magically modified by accompanying communication. That is to say, when the meta-message exists in a certain relationship to the message will change. Because the context shifts, because we judge it differently, we appraise it differently. We know that we're not in Kansas anymore. What is the meta-message that accompanies our message about learning or openness? What are the contexts of context that we're engaging as we try to put those messages out there? Well, I have a thought about that. Your thoughts may vary. I hope so. I hope one of the things that we get to do over the next few days is pull and twist and tug and maybe bunny hop after a couple of drinks to get to this. It seems that both those whose life is enriched by trans-contextual gifts and those who are impoverished by trans-contextual confusions are alike in one respect. For them there is always, or often, a double take. A falling leaf, the greeting of a friend, or a primrose by the river's brim is not just that and nothing more. Experienced breaches in the weave of contextual structure are in fact double binds and must necessarily promote what I am calling trans-contextual syndromes. I know it's awfully early in the morning for much serious talk about trans-contextual syndromes. I have funny stuff, it's coming, but still, think about this. What Bateson has done is now doubled completely back on himself and say that there's something about the double bind that is not only a prison, but potentially the way out, too. It depends on the way you frame it. It depends on the context you signal for that message. The thing that makes you either paralyzed or heedless or paranoid can also be something that gets you to pop up a level, perhaps, and be able to experience what he calls trans-contextual syndromes. I think that this is part of what I would like to mean by open education. Beyond access and cost, a primary benefit of open education, insofar as it is not merely open, but opening, is the opportunity for networked trans-contextualism. A planetary double take. This, ladies and gentlemen, is nothing less than the ambition I am sharing with you today. I would like the entire world to go, whoop! I can't tell, but I don't know. I'll have to look at the Twitter stream later. Really, networked trans-contextualism, or another way to put that, is some deep experience of the richness, the complexity, the ecologies of yearning that inform our desire to make meaning out of our experience, which we must do together, because that's where the meaning lies. But don't fake the double take. And this is where, in my experience, academia goes off the rails. We insist we are doing learning level 3. There's nothing more to talk about, but we're really at learning level 2, maybe 1, maybe not even past 0. We are deeply confused. I said we. Me too. At what point do we, in fact, become like the global open access brothel of non-learning? Was there a double take? Really? At what point? I don't know. I can't say. I am speaking to you today on the very edge of what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know what else to do at this point. I can now share with you some places where I found a double take. I'm not exactly sure how it happened. I think if I were, I wouldn't trust it. But I know that something did happen, and it has to do with something that Bateson, Pete Townsend, John Milton, Seymour Papert, and my network is helping me to learn. So this is a course I taught last spring. From Memex to YouTube, Cognition, Learning, and the Internet. It's another version of a course that I've taught for 5 years. I changed the title this time because I wanted to spiff it up. Changing the title, changed the frame, changed the context, and suddenly I was doing a double take as well. With a syllabus I had used before, but something about the title, something about the message changed something magically. Part of it had to do with Virginia Apgar. I now religiously, ritually give my students an APGAR test at the beginning of every class meeting so we can find out whether the class is likely to thrive or whether we have a blue baby class that day. And I refuse to do it without Virginia Apgar at the top of the slide because look at her perfect face. She was a pediatric anesthesiologist who carried a trach kit with her on the subways in New York City, and if your airway was blocked, you would welcome the scalpel. She knew you would. She was ready to pop it up to another level. They wouldn't let her become a surgeon because she was a woman. But she figured out something awfully mighty, and I thought, I wonder if I can trans-contextualize that. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I thought I was just being loony. So I said, what if we give a quiz to students to stress to them, not that they need specific recall this moment of the thing they just read, important as that is, they need to have a habit of being that would do very confusing things in their lives, like urge them to read the assigned material twice, Or would ask them, did you read any unassigned material? Which, of course, they don't do because we have syllabi that are 15 pages long specifying everything. They're probably afraid that if they read something unassigned, they'd have a question, they'd raise their hand, and the teacher would say, what a great question. We don't have time for that right now. We have to cover something. I mean, I have put this together as a way to suggest to students, here are some habits of being you might find helpful, certainly counterintuitive. This is one of the students who blogged during the class. All of the students blog. They blog in their own spaces. I aggregate them into a mother blog. Thank you, Barbara Ganley. This is Erin's blog. I know it is because it says Erin. That's the meta message. Erin. Pick a keyword, any keyword. And she's describing her final project. She came into my office and she said, Dr. Campbell, I don't know what to do my final project on. I said, well, what are you interested in? I don't know what I'm interested in. I thought, wow, this is it. I don't know what to do. I mean, really? But it was okay because we kept talking, and she talked about a story she liked a lot, but she wasn't sure how to work on the story she liked a lot. And she kept thinking about it and thinking about it. I just kept asking questions. She kept thinking about it. She kept thinking about it. I know what happened because she blogged about it. I spent hours trying to determine a clever story, but I wanted to make sure it was something my viewers were still familiar with, etc., etc., etc. Going through my old blog posts and notes proved to be very beneficial. I stumbled across a Word document entitled My Revelation, which I had not seen, and it talked about McLuhan's signature phrase, the medium is the message. Here's what she did. She went into extra normal, picked a series of characters who would enact dialogues between themselves based on themes emerging from a science fiction short story called Immigrant, which is about popping up to the next level in one's learning. Probably it's about that. Now, right? That's kind of explosive. That's about 58 layers deep. She actually did it based on an MTV show. There she is, or her avatar. This you may not recognize as a famous Canadian named Marshall McLuhan, and he's speaking this particular dialogue with Scott McCloud. And what Erin did was find a background that matched the background that was in the Scott McCloud book that we had been reading. Having these characters speak the words in the essays to each other, time to gestures in this environment. It kept on going. This you'll no doubt recognize as Bill Viola, right? And Ivan Illich talking about schooling in a schoolroom. Will there be condominiums and data space, deschooling society, online, in a YouTube video, put together with their words interacting with each other in the framework of an MTV-style reality show based on her analysis of a science fiction short story. Okay, there's this as well. This was a huge double take the day it came up. Julie was presenting. And Julie was trying to figure out in this Understanding Comics book what was going on with these circles. And we were all puzzling over the circles together. And my essential task as a teacher was just to tell them, go on. And they would look at me. They'd say, well, we said something. I said, well, say more. We have nothing more to say. I said, well, say more about that. And then they would keep talking. They would keep talking. And Julie read this question in the middle. Can you read it back there? I'll help you. Comics readers are also conditioned by other media and the real time of everyday life to expect a very linear progression. Just a straight line from point A to point B. But is that necessary? And I said, go on. And I assumed, because I wasn't at her level yet, that she would say, for now, these questions are the territories of games and strange little experiments. That didn't happen. What she said was, but is that necessary? Time will tell how comics addresses this issue or fails to complain. And we all felt an electric shock at the same moment that we all realized that completely without prompting or any indication she was about to do it, Julie was about to enact her transcontextual, deep, mysterious, entirely energizing understanding of the possibilities that Scott McCloud had helped her become aware of. Or there's Daco Lupatoni. This is a coined word. I'm a very, very lucky boy. John Udell came in and did one of my classes. I am still rubbing my hands in glee about that. Everyone should be a pirate and a brigand because a life of crime will lead you to John Udell in your class. You know, what can I say? There he was. And he was talking about the World Wide Web and being a web maker, not just a web user. And Lissy took him seriously. There was no assignment. There was no requirement. She went back and she blogged. She misspelled experience. I can't do anything about that now because it's the permalink. Good. That's the trace of the white-hot heat at which she wrote this post, which also came out of nowhere. And she writes, I'm going to completely admit that before this class I knew absolutely nothing about the World Wide Web and Internet infrastructure. And honestly, it still confuses me. Who knew that the web and the Internet were different things? I thought they were simply interchangeable words, synonyms that might be looked up or could be looked up on Microsoft Word, but they're different. And to my surprise, when I click on Internet, there are no synonyms for it. It is its own thing. Which brings us to what John Udell was saying in class. When it comes to the World Wide Web, our imagination is our only limit. We decide what we want to make, who we want to share it with, and what we want it to mean. Take words, for example. Dacolupatoni. When you Google that, nothing comes up. But here is our experiment. When I read those words, but here is our experiment, I thought, wow, can I sign up for this course? Let's search it in a few hours, and probably this will come up, which is a link back to her own post, which is recursion, which is a link to a Google search on recursion, which says, did you mean recursion? And then that person can be linked to this. And it goes on and on. Now, isn't that cool? What she understood transcontextually, transtemporally, is that the act of faith and yearning implicit in linking back to a post that has a word that has not yet been indexed is the essence of what building the web together is all about. And then there was the meta team. And I told the meta team, this is a final project you really should consider seriously because meta and team are anagrams. And they looked at me. And then they did this. This was the meta team. 2 graduate students, 1 undergraduate student, whose task was to tell the course the story of the course at the end of the course. They were to be the conspicuous participant observers in the journey we were making together. And because the people in the course knew that there were people in the course tracking the course, preparing to tell the story of the course, really, we're all in the meta team together. This meta team made that visible. It changed the course in ways that I couldn't have predicted. This was the final project. Insert cognition here. Pick a link or don't. Home, who, what, why, thoughts. And who were the Who? Well, we've covered that already. Pete Townshend is the lead guitarist of the Who. Okay. These are the essayists we read. The meta team constructed wordles made of the blog posts all the students in the class contributed during the week or weeks in which we were reading these essayists. So if you go online, and I urge you to do this, click on the Wordle, click on the links embedded in the Wordle that take you to various spots along the journey as the students blogged it during our reading. And then there's the what. The students discovered that they could search across the aggregated blogs on time, media, learning, and internet and discover thematically some of the things that kept happening. And they were surprised. They were trans-contextualized. They searched on media, think, people. These emerged as very big words. And then the why, knowing and making. An essay about the making of the meta team's meta project. So this will be a meta essay. I've lost track. It links back even to Dacolupatoni. They were making this and linking along the entire set of vectors right up until the very end. I love this page. What were we thinking? What were we thinking? Wow, a couple of things going on there. And those links, lost, feedback, recursion. This is actually kind of a toy as well. You can go and you can play click on these links. Find that when you click on thoughts, reflect or don't. This website is a little different. What do you think? Send the Meta team an email and share some thoughts. That's still up there. That's still live. I urge you to send the Meta team some email and share your thoughts. What were they thinking? What are you thinking? Lost? Feedback? Recursion? So, there's a wonderful video that I don't have time to show you. It's a video that you can find online. It's Alan Kay at the Night Symposium in May of 2012. It's up on Vimeo. It'll be better if you go there and look at it yourself, I think. He has some very harsh words to say about higher education. And then at the end, he talks about Gregory Bateson, Ecologies of Mind, the pattern that connects. I didn't hear Alan say those things until I'd been editing the video for a couple of hours. And then finally I thought, oh, ecologies of mind. Scott McCloud puts it this way: for just as the body's largest organ, our skin, is seldom thought of as an organ, so too is the panel itself overlooked as comic's most important icon. A general indication that space and time are being divided. Notice the openness and the framing inherent in that. Notice the interesting trans-contextualized position of the narrator. I know he's not really Scott McCloud. I got that meta message. And yet, there he is, speaking to us somehow. Headline: the universe continues to surprise us. 2 citizen scientists have discovered a very rare world, a planet that orbits 2 stars and has a second pair of stars revolving around it. Wired explains just how odd this is. This is an interesting pronoun there. Wired thinks that the odd thing is that there's a planet that orbits 2 stars and has a second pair of stars revolving around it. Yeah, pretty odd. I think the really odd thing is that 2 citizen scientists have discovered a very rare world. Just how odd is that? Mike Chorost, Worldwide Mind, writes, what's in one's head is orders of magnitude more complex than anything one sees in the sky. The best proof of this is that when one says, suddenly, I feel so small, the galaxy has nothing to say back. It's not complex enough to have thoughts. This is why I think not of open education, but opening education. That desire to have every word we say in the primal darkness listened to with compassionate intensity. We have wanted a worldwide mind inchoately, inarticulately, for thousands of years. Or as George Dyson puts it, the stored program computer, as conceived by Alan Turing and delivered by John von Neumann, broke the distinction between numbers that mean things and numbers that do things. Our universe would never be the same. Hard to understand that. I think any form of education that omits a deep realization of what Chorost and Dyson are describing is not an opening education. I think about Brian Wilson, who was picking up good vibrations, after all. One of his good vibrations was the day he wrote a song called Fire, and was performing it in the studio, giving everybody fire helmets so that they would get into the mood. And a building burned across the way, and this was very disturbing to Brian. He thought that somehow writing this song and performing it in the studio that day had caused the fire to happen. We know that's not right. We know that that's not a good adaptive response to the universe. And yet there is a yearning, even in the midst of that horror, that I want to return to. It's the yearning of Orpheus, the yearning of an opening education. That somehow what's in our heads, somehow what we put together in some strange correspondence and grand harmony can actually matter, can be a difference that makes a difference, as Bateson describes it, an idea that somehow is part of the world we experience and share. And we have to believe something along those lines, Orpheus tells us. Or when we turn, when we lose that faith that there is something to yearn for, even though we can't see it yet, the very thing we yearn for will slip away from us, deadened by our own lack of willingness to believe. Oliver Sacks writes, "The essential thing is feeling at home in the world, knowing in the depths of one's being that one has a real place in the home of the world. The essential function of such hospitals as Mount Carmel, which house several millions of the world's population, is that they should provide hospitality, the feeling of home, for patients who have lost their original homes. To the extent that Mount Carmel acts as a home, it is deeply therapeutic to all of its patients. But to the extent that it acts as an institution, it deprives them of their sense of reality and home, and forces them into the false homes and compensations of regression and sickness." Our schools, our opening education, has to provide hospitality, a feeling of home. Not so confusion is reduced, but so that confusion is strengthened for that act of yearning, to be placed in an ecology of yearning. This is Salisbury Hill. Some of you may know that Peter Gabriel song. It's a song about experiencing a moment of choosing, a trans-contextual moment. It's a moment that I and several of my students experienced back in 2003. We were overseas in Bath doing a course called Transatlantic Crossings in Popular Music from 1955 to the present. And what an excuse for self-indulgence that was on the part of the instructor. And magically, that last day, we took our lunches, and parts of the books we had read together and the music we had heard together up on Salisbury Hill. And we looked over the city of Bath, and I said, "That's your life down there. Those are the last 5 weeks. What now?" And one by one they spoke, for they were about to graduate from college, of the conveyor belt they felt themselves to be on, the place of great uncertainty, terror, and in some respects wonder they felt themselves to occupy at that moment. And then we all fell silent. I think we were yearning together. I think that little group was an ecology of yearning. Much later, after Prufrock has had his say, we find Eliot writing, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." Or to pick someone even a little closer to where I live, Carl Sandburg. "Give me hunger, O you gods that sit and give the world its orders. Give me hunger, pain and want. Shut me out with shame and failure from your doors of gold and fame. Give me your shabbiest, weariest hunger. But leave me a little love, a voice to speak to me in the day end, a hand to touch me in the dark room, breaking the long loneliness. In the dusk of day shapes, blurring the sunset, one little wandering western star thrust out from the changing shores of shadow. Let me go to the window, watch there the day shapes of dusk, and wait and know the coming of a little love." I wish for us in this conference that window, that waiting, that knowing, that love. Thank you.